Hey, church. I just want to give you another recap of what happened in week 2 of the talk. And just to give you a reminder of like the overarching theme of this kind of series is to really get people thinking about the things that they haven't thought about, or thinking about the things they've thought about, but just a little bit more, into a little more context. And last week, we kind of ended off with the big question of, are you looking for the right person, or are you becoming the right person? And again, that's going to be an underlying theme in all of these messages. And week 2, we kind of pick up where we left off of, guys, don't be hypocrites. Don't treat, ladies, women in your life the way you wouldn't want someone else treating your ladies in your life already, like your mom, your sister, your aunt, your cousin, whoever it might be. Don't go doing those things that you wouldn't want other people to do to your people. And for women, that theme of like, don't be a commodity. Don't be just a good that's passed around and then thrown out when they no longer need it. That you are worth way more than that. And your worth doesn't, come from how well you can perform, but like who you are and who you've been created to be. And from there, we really talked about, this idea that we don't need to know the mechanics of how things work in this realm of purity. And purity really is this umbrella of issues that we have, as a culture, have kind of narrowed down to sex. Usually when people think of purity, they're like, oh, just don't have sex, abstain from sex. Yeah, sex, keep it till marriage. But really, purity is all your thoughts and your words and your deeds. It has to deal with everything. And so when we look at purity, we've narrowed it down to sex, which is, again, a big part of it. And we've, diluted it, or we've distorted the idea of what that is, because, you come to church and people say, sex, stay away from it, it's bad. Wait till marriage, it's not good. But that's a lie almost, because God created sex as a gift for his people. God created sex and it was a good thing. And so to say that it's a bad thing and stay away from it is only a half truth, because it's not a bad thing. It's a really good thing, but it's only in a certain context. You can look at a fire, and a fire is a good thing when it's in a fireplace. A fire is a bad thing when it's outside of the fireplace, and that's really what sex is like. And so even though sex is a big part of purity, it's not everything. And another thing that we talked about is how the mechanics of those things of purity, like, we don't need to know how to do those things. We all know how to cuss because it's all around us. We all have impure thoughts without even trying it. No one needs to really tell somebody how to have sex because it's easily accessible. You can figure it out on your own pretty much. The deeper question isn't how to do those things, but are those things wise to do in this context at this time where we're at in life? And the problem with trying to figure out the wisdom behind those things is that there's just this mass confusion about it. I talked about how I've done this series before, and the question I asked, the students I surveyed, and it's like, is sex before marriage a bad thing? And it was like split down the middle 50-50. Part of it because they were in church and they knew what the right answer was, but yet the life that they're living at school and at home and through media and all that stuff says it's okay. It's just like ice cream. You find your right flavor by trying different flavors. And so there's this mass confusion of what purity is. There's this mass confusion of when and why and how to do things. And so this mass confusion just like leads to confused thinking. We don't know what's right or wrong. We don't know where to go from here, because we go to church and we hear one thing. We have our friend groups and we hear another thing. We have our home life, and we might even hear another message. And then on top of that, they have these little devices where they have the world at their fingertips, and they'll definitely hear a contrary message to what's going on inside the church. And so there's just mass confusion of what's going on. And then the scary part from all those things of like having this mass confusion leading to confused thinking is that there's confused actions now. That because of all these messages, they'll act confused. They don't know what's right and what's wrong, and so they'll just test the waters. And the scary thing is that what we ultimately believe about purity, what we ultimately believe about what we say and what we do, about relationships, about sex, what we believe about those things, those are going to be played out in our real lives. If we think that like, so this is a statistic for you, that 90% of teens think that pornography is, when it's talked about, it's just okay, it's encouraged, or just neutral about it. 90% of teens will say that that's how they feel about it. So if that's how they feel about it and that's how they view the world, well, then pornography is not going to be a big deal. But it is a huge deal. It's a massive deal. And so what you think about those things, of the words you use, of how you talk to the opposite sex, of how you talk to the same sex, if you think it's okay to use derogatory terms towards people or put people down and you don't feel like there's a problem with it, you're just kind of horsing around, well, then you're going to do that in everyday life. And there are massive consequences to those, because what we do now and before and after marriage will define who we are. Our choices have consequences. And so this is what we're kind of uncovering in our whole discussion, that there's this confused actions because of, again, all the mass confusion leads to confused thinking, which leads to confused actions. And, we talked about how in Isaiah it talks about, all of us that knew God at one point, but then we just said, let's just do our own thing. And we forget that we're God's people, that we were created for a purpose, that we were loved. And really the reason that we stray away is because we forget that we are loved completely, that we feel that God won't provide in these areas, so I'll do it on my own. And just as people, we forget that too often. And so it's all bringing us back to the question that we asked in the first week, is like, are you becoming the people that you would ultimately want to find as your right person, or are you just looking? Because again, you can look at all the messages that you get from everywhere, and you can take those in, but do those ultimately lead you to become the person that you ultimately want to be and that you ultimately want to find? Because that's what Jesus does for us. 1 Corinthians 13, that whole love chapter of being patient, being kind, less envious, and not boastful, but being those things of trustworthy and gentle. Like, are you becoming more and more of those things? Because I think, I hear a lot of the discussion going on in small groups, and we all want some part of that. I mean, I think back to my small group, and, the students were saying, I want someone who's godly and smart and funny and patient, and someone who buys me food, which I'll take as someone who's going to serve me. And so when we look at those qualities, it's like, yeah, of course we want those things, but are we those things for other people? Are we gentle and are we kind? Are we serving? Are we godly? Like, are we those for other people? So that's our recap, and I hope this is really a blessing. The questions are going to be down below that we talked about in small groups, so continue the conversation. If you're not having the conversation, start the conversation, and we really do hope this is a blessing for you. So, bye.